Well, in just the last half hour, we have learned two important dates for the city of Detroit and the bankruptcy filing for that troubled city. The judge in Detroit just scheduling a hearing on the city's Chapter 9 bankruptcy filing for this Wednesday. That's the 24th, July 24th. And then next Monday, the Ingham County judge will rule whether Detroit's bankruptcy can actually proceed. Peter Kaufman is one of the leading distressed investment bankers in the country. He's also the president of Gordian Group, and he is here. You know, I think the big question here is who are the winners and who are the losers? 100,000 creditors. Are they the losers? Are the pensioners, they going to be the losers? Kevin Orr wants those pensions cut.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you. Nice to be back here. There are very few winners at this point in time, but it depends how it's going to play out. You've got two big, interesting issues to me here. One is the pensions, collective bargaining agreements, pensions, retiree health costs versus general obligation bonds. Historically in this country, the general obligation bonds have been sacrosanct.
But does that change in your opinion this time around?
We've been seeing this coming like a freight train. Freight trains move slowly but inexorably, and we don't see how politically they're going to be able to slash the municipal workers and not deal with the general obligation bonds. Kevin Orr, the manager in Detroit, has said he proposed giving general obligation bonds cents on the dollar.
He's the one that's calling for the cuts to the pension benefits, and that's why we're now going to court. They are now going to court.
That's right.
Because they're fighting this. They're fighting not just the constitutionality of the entire move, but also it's a political fight as well, which we shouldn't be surprised by that.
It's both economic and political, and it's heightened from the pension side by the fact that on the private sector, pension retiree costs are backstopped by the Federal Pension Guarantee Corporation, and there is no such backstop for the municipal worker. So, I see that as a big upcoming fight, and we've been saying for a while that, rightly or wrongly, we see bonds that are going to be compromised in these larger situations, and that's going to have ripple and ramification effects with the whole municipal market.
You also have, the difference is, and when you look at a corporate bankruptcy, certainly that's going to be handled differently than with a public bankruptcy. One of the things in this public bankruptcy that has already been bantered about and discussed is the opportunity for a bailout, a federal bailout. Again, this would be a political move. Next thing you know, the president's involved and the story changes. But who is that good and who is that bad for at the end of the day?
Well, actually, it happened in Detroit with General Motors. That's a private company.
There you go. Private company bailed out. Sure.
That's now owned in large part by the federal government. And last I checked, Detroit is the home of General Motors. I'm not a fan of federal bailouts. I think they're inelegant and they don't send the right message. What I'm a fan of, what I'd love to see happen here, I would have loved to see it in General Motors, but this is where we are, is the federal government acting as a facilitator and a backstop to try and bring private capital into this situation and use that as a catalyst to get everybody around the table to talk turkey and be pragmatic. We need some pragmatism here.
The federal government as a negotiator, a mediator, if you will, between private investment and public debt, which would be risky, but
the way they do that, if they reach the point in the federal government where they say we're going to write a check here, then don't write the check, but provide some backstops to private capital to come in. And instead of the people at the table trying to rearrange the deck chairs on the Detroit Titanic, you've got real money coming to the table to try and create a public-private partnership to deal with the mess that is Detroit. I think that's creative, elegant, complicated, but I think it's a much better way to use the heft of the federal government than simply, hi, we're going to bail out Detroit, because what's next? There are a whole bunch of cities that are going to stand in line for what's next.
Absolutely, and that's where the bailout talk gets a little frightening as well, but I agree. If they're smart enough, they could negotiate this, they should hire you. Peter Kaufman, thank you very much. It's good to have you on something like this.
Nice to see you.
Space, the final frontier.